Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Bon Voyage Besties with your amazing hosts, Rosa and Rachel. And today we're talking about one of our least favorite sides of travel, and that's when the trip falls apart. So, despite what you may see on social media, travel is unpredictable and far from perfect. Behind those dreamy beach photos and aesthetic airport selfies are delayed flights, canceled plans, bad weather, lost luggage, and sometimes even friends who bail out at the last minute. So we know that's not fun nor glamorous, but it makes it all part of the adventure. So, in today's episode, we want to chat a little bit more about some real travel disasters, the kinds of things that can completely derail a trip, and more importantly, how you can overcome them. Because while things may not always go according to plan, sometimes those chaotic moments end up becoming the most memorable travel stories and fun to talk about later on, right? So if you ever had a flight canceled, a hotel booking disappear, or you're like me where you booked multiple hotels for the same destination at once, or a trip that just didn't go the way you imagined, this episode is definitely for you. So let's get into it, besties.
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics ever.
I know. I feel like sometimes I get so mad at myself when I have like travel fail, especially when it's caused by like my own personal error, because I think to myself, like, Rosa, you should have known better. And in every trip, whether something small from like my last trip when I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, I looked at the gate like 20 times and I was like, all right, gate C, tell me why I ended up like in like Terminal B. And then I'm looking, I go to the gate and then I'm like, wait a minute, like it's going to, I forget, it was going to like Mexico, like Cabo or something. And I was like, this is not going back to
It's
Newark.
not
So,
where I am going to.
so I had to like run, get on the train, go back to the right terminal, which ended up being like on the opposite end. So like there's always something that goes on, right? But like at the same time, you have to learn how to pivot and just kind of have a different mindset and just kind of like roll with the punches, right? Because travel is not always glamorous. Despite what you see on social media. So,
Yeah.
Rachel, why do you think that social media makes travel look perfect when the reality it could be extremely unpredictable?
I think on social media we always have an instinctive desire to post about the positive things in life. Like I know everybody always says like with social media when you compare yourself to other people just remember that they're only posting the highlights. They're not posting like their lowest moments for everybody to see. And I think it's kind of the same with travel to some extent, especially if you're like us and you're in travel content creation. You do get creators who don't necessarily want to post the bad things that happen because maybe it was because of their own era and they're embarrassed because they're supposed to be an expert in travel. I know sometimes with me when I've made stupid mistakes, like I can share them on social media because we can have a laugh, but I can understand totally why maybe for other people they feel like a little bit embarrassed to share it, especially if it was like an insane mistake, like booking multiple like hotels or like booking multiple dinner reservations on the same night. Like I can understand why people would be reluctant to share that. And then also there's a lot of like anxiety around traveling, like especially traveling solo. I know a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh, like I want to travel solo, but I'm scared. So there's also like that mindset of, oh, I don't want to post the bad because then maybe it will discourage people from taking that leap and experiencing something amazing and trying to avoid travel always sounding like a mess just because perhaps they want their social media page to be a place of positivity. So there could be that aspect as well. But yeah, I think there's like a lot of reasons why sometimes social media can sanitize the reality of travel disasters like delayed flights, canceled flights, etc., etc.
I feel like a lot of times people don't want to talk about what goes wrong just for that same reason, right? Like for us on this podcast and even on our own socials, our goal is always to help inspire those to get out there and see the world, whether locally or going on a far destination. However, I feel like it's also important to talk about those mistakes, right? Because especially for people that are thinking about going on, let's say, their first solo trip, they might feel like they have this anxiety. They don't know. What if they get lost? What if they take the wrong train? What if their luggage gets lost? But that's the reality. Whether you're a new traveler or a seasoned traveler, things happen. And it's all about changing your mindset and just kind of figuring out, all right, this happened. What can I do to fix it? Right. So I feel like it's definitely important to also talk about the things that go wrong because it allows others to see, like, listen, like this person travels very often and they still encounter these issues. So, like, I should feel a little bit more encouraged to get out there and like feel like I have the tools and preparation to kind of adjust to things if something does happen to go wrong.
And then too, people can like have a better understanding about what to do when those things go wrong because something that's just going to make it worse, whether it's a canceled flight or something more extreme, is absolutely falling apart and not being able to like think through and solve the problem. Like I know for me, like I get flight anxiety, so I can be a very anxious person, but it's so important to keep your shit together in the moment and solve the problem. And I do think if there's more examples of that on social media, people will feel more empowered and know, like, okay, if this happens to me, here's a clear way to go about solving it.
I definitely agree. So, have you ever had a situation where the trip started to fall apart even before you left the airport, and what happened?
So I don't think I've ever had a trip fall apart before I left the airport. I've had, believe it or not, flights canceled when I'm already in the destination and then I'm not able to get home. And that's happened before I left the airport. So that's happened on two separate occasions. It happened in Madrid and it happened in Geneva. I woke up early in the morning to get ready to go to the airport, and United texted me in Madrid. At first, it was just like, oh, like the flight is delayed by 6 hours. And then in Geneva, it was just like an out and out, your flight is canceled. There was a technical issue with the plane. Here are the other flights that you can book to get home. So in those cases, it was actually a good thing because I think it would have been especially annoying to wake up, go to the airport, go through passport control to get back in the US, and then have my flight canceled. So that way, I do feel like kind of fortunate that I was able to just like deal with it in the comfort of my hotel room and extend my stay right from there. Because, like, I feel like if I were already at the airport, especially if I've already gone through border control, it would have just been like such a hassle. I did have an issue at Philadelphia Airport for my very first international trip. We were supposed to go to Italy, and it was through one of the prep schools in South Jersey. I'm not going to name drop or anything, but this was when I was 19. We were going to Italy. I was so excited to go. And then my mom and I get to the airport, and there's this like a miserable woman. She was just like a random passenger. She wasn't even like working for this was US Air at the time. It wasn't even American yet. And she came up to us like out of the blue, like, "Are you going to Italy?" And we were like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, you're not going anywhere." And I was just like, "Who do you think you are?" She was so rude. Like, honestly, I hope her flights are canceled like forever in the indefinite future because she was so rude. I still remember this.
What a jerk.
Oh, I know. She was like some stranger. So my mom like looks at the departures board, and the flight to Rome was canceled and they were not able to book everybody to a flight to get there. So our entire trip to Italy was completely canceled and I had to stay home for my spring break. And that just devastated me. It was my first time going to Europe. I was looking forward to it so badly. And we did end up using the credits from US Air to go to Bermuda, and that was also absolutely lovely. It was in the off season, so it was mostly a little rainy. It wasn't really beach weather, so I would love to go back to Bermuda again more in their high season when like the beaches are accessible. And I loved it. Bermuda was fantastic, but it just was like heartbreaking for like a little 19-year-old, right? Like, I mean, talk about
Oh,
a
poor baby
disaster.
Rachel. But at least you guys were able to pivot and find another destination.
Yeah, and I've more than made up for it with all like the trips that I booked over to Europe. Like I feel like I'm just over there constantly now, so I'm like, more than good. But yeah, like what was upsetting about that is like what a way to be told. And it wasn't even US Air that told us. Like this was just some random person in the airport with their luggage. Like I don't know if they were also on the same flight and like angry and they wanted to like make everyone else angry. I think I would have handled it better if like we went up to US Air and they were just like, this is the situation, this is how we can rebook you. But I think the problem was because it was a big group trip, they couldn't rebook all those people. Whereas I know I've had instances where my flight is canceled. I'm able to get out the next day or like later in the day, and it makes it a little bit more manageable. But if you book a group trip like that, buyer beware because the more people you have to do that rebooking, I mean, there's a chance you might not be able to get that flight. So after that, too, I was always kind of like, nervous about booking a big group trip. Like a small group trip is one thing, but like a big group trip where you're all leaving together with an organization, I don't do those anymore. Yeah.
It sounds like it was bad, but you guys were able to pivot. And I think that's the important part too, right? Because unfortunately, I think the biggest thing with travel is that you're not in control of every aspect of the process, especially when it comes to transportation, right? Whether if you're taking a train or whether you're driving somewhere and taking a flight, you're not in control of a lot of different factors that can kind of alter your destination, right? Or your getting to the place. So I think being able to be proactive or in the moment, just being able to kind of like use it, like granted, you ended up in Bermuda, which was in Italy, but you still had an amazing time and were able to kind of pivot out of that situation. I know one of my biggest like issues that happened. So my friend was going to be getting married in Portugal. And this was in 2020. So we all know what happened in 2020 with the
Mm-mm-mm.
lovely pandemic. So obviously her trip got canceled and well, actually got postponed. So we were able to get like a travel credit through the airline, which was fine, right? So we were ready and prepared for this trip in 2020 to go to Portugal for her wedding. So finally in 2021, we were able to travel there and her wedding was going to take place in the month of August. So the prior year, I had checked our passport when I booked our flight. Everything was good to go. But now, fast forward to 2021, I realized that Samantha's passport was going to be expiring like a month after we were going to be landing in Portugal. So, one of the things with a lot of countries, and you definitely need to make sure that you're doing your research. So, a lot of countries, in order for you to clear custom, your passport cannot expire within 6 months of like your travel, right? So, because her passport was going to be expiring in September and we were traveling in August, I knew that this could be an issue for us and we might not be able to get into the country, right? Because her passport was going to be expiring and it didn't fall within that criteria. So I was like, all right, I realized that it was probably in the month of like April or like May. So I was like, all right, I have like 3 months to get her a passport. So at the time, Sam was like 15. So Michael was traveling. He was actually in Colombia. And in order for us to be able to get her passport, we needed both parents' signatures. So it was a whole disaster. So, long story short, we did the application, we were able to submit it. However, there was no guarantee if or when we were going to get her passport because remember, this is still during the pandemic where a lot of like the US government agencies were operating on a very limited capacity. So a lot of people were saying that their passports were not going to be arriving for like 12 to 15 weeks. It was like a mess. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to trust the process. So we had everything booked. One of the things definitely to make sure is to get travel insurance because you never know when or if you're going to need it. So, anyways, we did the application. We're just like waiting, waiting, waiting. Our flight was leaving, I believe, like on a Saturday night to go to Lisbon out of Newark. So, we're just like getting closer to it. So, now we're probably like a month out right before our trip. So I'm starting reading like all these different like threads like on Facebook and people saying like what to do like if you need a passport expedited. They were like contact your local congressman. So I started calling our office like every single day. I was like, please, you need to help me. So I sent an email. They were like, listen, we were able to get through to the passport agency. We can't guarantee that it's going to be expedited. However, we can change it so that way you can pay for like an expedited service where they will send it to me via UPS as soon as it gets processed. So that way I speed up the process a little bit. So I was like, fine, anything you can do to kind of help me, right? So I ended up paying a little bit extra in order for them to send it to me via like UPS and just kind of like overnight it once it was ready. But again, I didn't have a date or when my passport was going to come. Long story short, our passport came that Friday and we were flying out that Saturday. So our
Oh,
contingency was like, listen, worst case scenario, if we could not make it to Portugal, one of the trips, because we were going to go for 2 weeks. So this was going to be like a long trip that Mike already had like his PTO scheduled. So did I. So we didn't want to kind of waste it. So we were like, all right, our backup plan is to go to Hawaii. We'll just stay like local and still go somewhere that we wanted to go to. But long story short, that passport, I remember Michael calls me and I was at work and he sends me like a picture. And I was like, oh my God. So I call him and I was like, is that the passport? So excited. And we were able to make it on the trip, but it was so stressful. But at the same time, I was like, listen, if we're not able to make it, let's come up with a backup plan. And when I tell you, it was like to the last possible second that we were like, all right, we're making it to Portugal. So
oh
don't
my
be like
God.
me. Make sure that you're checking your expiration date make sure that if you are traveling to like outside of the US, that you're checking the rules and regulation for that specific country because again, a lot of places require your passport to be valid up to 6 months after I believe when you land at the destination. So make sure you have that criteria. And another thing too, this happened to my friend recently. They traveled from Dominican Republic to Colombia and they didn't have enough pages left on their passport. So they had a really hard time getting into Colombia because of that. So making sure you have enough pages on your passport, making sure your passport does not expire for, a while, and just doing it ahead of time because you never know how long it's going to take for you to get your passport. And one of the good things now is that you can renew your passport online. So if you already have a passport that's valid and it's going to be expiring, just do that now because you don't want to be like me and wait until like the day before.
No, like, you're reminding me, so my passport's good till December, um, 27. I'm going to renew that passport, like, January 27, like, a year out, because once it gets to a year out, I start getting nervous because, like you said, a lot of destinations require 6 months validity, and I just don't wanna be hassled with that, and I'm not really sure how far out in advance you can renew it, but I know for my peace of mind, like a year out, I always try to renew it, and you're right, like, at least you can renew it online now, so if your passport is still active, that's the easy way to go, and try not to let your passport expire because then you have to bring all that documentation again, and it's just, like, a real hassle, so I would definitely just do it online and make sure your passport's valid, and this is, like, a good reminder if you live in the US, always check travel.gov. Always look up your destination because they have the entry requirements because every country is different. So if you're not entirely sure, go to travel.gov and check those entry requirements for your destination because it's true. I've heard of people having trouble getting into countries because they don't have one blank page available and it's caused all kinds of problems and everywhere is different. So you have to keep track of that stuff. And like it sucks, but it is your responsibility to keep track of it. Like you have to be organized. Like nobody's going to hold your hand through border control.
That's very true. And I also, you bring up a good point too. This actually happened to us when we went to Thailand. So initially, it was going to be a mother daughter trip. And then last minute, Michael decided to join us. So by the time that we booked his flight, so we were doing a layover from JFK to Dubai and then Dubai to Bangkok. So unfortunately, we had to go on separate flights to Thailand. So his flight was arriving about the same time as ours, maybe like 30 minutes like before. However, our flight for Sam and I going into Dubai was a little bit delayed. So long story short, Michael got there before we did into Thailand and he didn't know where we were going to stay. So when he's going through custom control and like immigration in Bangkok, they're asking him all sorts of questions and he had no idea like where he was staying. So like he had to fill out like the form and it was asking for the name of the hotel. So he was so funny because he asked someone, he's like, "Hey, what hotel are you staying in?" And just like copied like the place of like some random people because he was stressed out. He didn't know because our flight had gotten delayed, like when we were gonna land, and he had to go through like immigration and they wouldn't let him through because he didn't have the information for the accommodation. So when you are traveling to a destination, one of the things that I always like to do is take a screenshot of the hotel, have like the address on there as well. So that way, when you are landing, sometimes you might not be able to access like the Wi Fi or the internet at the airport. So making sure that you know where you're staying because a lot of places they will ask you that when you are filling a customs form.
Yeah, yikes. Always have those screenshots because the other thing too is like you don't know how reliable your cell service is going to be. So having that screenshot really does go a long way. So Rosa, how about when you're on the ground? What would you say was like one of your worst like travel mishaps where the trip is falling apart and how did you handle it in the moment?
I've had so many. So I won't include getting food poisoning because you're just like miserable. And food poisoning is one of those things that unfortunately you kind of have to like let it run its cycle. I would have to say, let's see. So one of the times I traveled, we went to the Bahamas and we traveled during like spring break. And we were flying on standby tickets with the airline. So for our listeners that don't know what standby is, sometimes like if you have like a friend or someone that works like in the travel industry with like an airline, sometimes they get like heavily discounted like flight tickets that you can purchase and they can be extended to like friends and family. So our friends had gotten us like really heavily discounted tickets to fly to and from the Bahamas via standby. But basically, you're flying if they have open seats on the flight. So you're not guaranteed a seat, right? So we kind of knew that going in, and we had no issues flying there. But on our way back, we were traveling during spring break. So not very smart to fly standby during
No, I
spring
would
break
not fly standby during spring break.
to the Bahamas. So we
Girl.
could not get a flight. We could not get a flight. They were like, listen, every single flight on this airline carrier is completely like booked for the day. So we ended up having to like stay overnight. So we're like, you know what? Let's just stay. There was like a hotel nearby. It was such a sketchy place. So we ended up like checking out of there and going back to like Atlantis Paradise Island because we're like, I don't know what I thought. I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna get murdered. I was afraid to even use the bathroom. Like, I was like, you need to get me out of this place. I
Maybe
don't even
there's a
remember
mouse in the bathroom.
there was something. There was something. I thought something was gonna crawl up in the toilet. It was
Cockroaches in the
just like,
toilet.
yeah, it was really, really like a sketchy place. So we ended
No
up having to
thanks.
go back to our hotel where we ended up having to pay like a ridiculous amount to stay there overnight. Plus, remember, we had to take a taxi to the airport. So we had to do that all over again. So what we initially thought we were going to be saving money by flying on like standby tickets ended up costing us like three times the amount because we had to like factor in like an extra night. And also too, I was stressed out because I had to go to work like the next day. So like I had to also like call out of work because I was like stranded in the Bahamas. I mean, granted, like we were on the beach drinking cocktails because what else are you gonna do, right? Like I'm already stranded here. I'm not gonna stress out. So if you are traveling somewhere, just kind of being flexible. And like even like you said, like you were flying on multiple times and like the airline canceled it. So having a contingency plan and knowing like, listen, this is outside of your control. So like you're not gonna sit there and stress out, just kind of pivot and be like me, just sit at the beach and drink some pina coladas and forget that you missed like 10 flights.
Yeah. I mean, like, I know I talked about this story before, but that's what happened to me in Madrid. Like, there was a hold at Newark Airport because there were all sorts of storms and multiple flights got canceled. My co-teacher, her flight was canceled from Key West, so she couldn't make it in. And then my flight going back from Madrid to Newark was canceled. And it was the same thing. It was spring break. So everyone rebooked their flights. So the next one wasn't until 3 days out. So I had to contact my supervisor at the time, and she was amazing. She was like, look, this is out of your control. Like, you can't magically have United send a private Boeing 777 to pick you up. Like, I mean, that stuff, it's out of your control. So, like, when that happens, try to stay calm. I know it's difficult. Make sure you have travel insurance, but at the same time, don't beat yourself up because there are so many factors that just like you're not going to have control over. And the important thing is how you react to it. Like when my flight got canceled, I called United, I got it rebooked. I was able to rebook some hotel rooms. And yeah, it kind of like sucked because like getting travel insurance to reimburse me was a bit of a nightmare. But I was kind of like, look, like the weather's beautiful. I'm in Madrid. There's some art museums I want to see. I want to go to the park. So it was like definitely worth it to enjoy Madrid a little bit and make the best of my time. Like when I called home, my parents were like, well, your trip just got extended. So enjoy it. So at least in that case, though, the cancellations happened coming back. So it's not like my trip got cut short. I think if that were the case, like I'd be a lot more upset and devastated. But at least with this, it was like, you get extra time in Spain, just like smile about it. But the travel insurance was so super important. So we were talking a lot about flight delays and cancellations. I feel like that's so important to talk about, especially now with the world being a little bit in chaos with like flights being rerouted, cancellations. So my advice is to always just like have that travel insurance. If your flight is canceled in the EU and it's something within the airline's control, keep in mind you can always apply to be compensated. Now this has to be something within the airline's control. Like I don't know, I know there's a lot of issues with flights to the Middle East being canceled. I don't know if that necessarily falls under that. I don't think it does. But say if it's like a mechanical issue or like not having a crew, then the airline has to compensate you. So that actually happened with Geneva. It was due to a mechanical issue and we had to stay there another day. And United, I contacted them and under that law, they were like, yeah, they're like, you can wait for the euros. We'll like send you a check to your apartment. Or they also offered, they're like, hey, if you want $1,000 flight credit, we could just comp that like immediately if you want to do that instead. And I ended up going with the flight credit because I knew I was going to Athens, and I just like booked a airline ticket at a heavy discount since that was an option, since I fly with them all the time anyway. But that's just like something to keep in mind. Read about your destination, because depending on local laws, you could get compensated for a delayed or canceled flight.
Yeah, and also I know if you're traveling within like the US, some airlines as well, like depending on how long the delays are, sometimes they might do something a little bit more simple, maybe like offer you like a like food voucher so at least you can get something to eat like in the airport. I know when it comes to like inclement weather, so that actually happened to me going into New Mexico. So I was actually supposed to be flying out of Newark on that Monday morning. However, we had a wonderful blizzard that was going to be hitting the tri-state
It
area.
was insane. It was
It
insane.
was
We've had the worst
crazy.
winter, guys, the worst winter.
However, I'm also that person that I'm just like, is it really going to be that bad? I don't know. Because sometimes they predict that it's going to be horrific and you get like half an inch of snow and you're just like, really? This is like what I mentally prepared for. So, anyways, our flight was supposed to be flying out that Monday. However, a lot of the airlines were kind of getting ahead of it and were
Yeah.
sending like emails and like text messages like, hey, we can offer like free cancellation or you can like change your flight if you wanted to. So, taking advantage of that, if you're able to kind of be a little bit more flexible with your travel plans. So, I ended up getting, so I was actually doing a press trip with like Google and my contact from Google reached out to me. He's like, hey, Rosa, like, getting ahead of this blizzard, would you be able to come in and fly tomorrow, Sunday, as opposed to Monday? I was like, oh my God, I'm not packed. I'm not ready to go. But yes, let's just like do it. Right. Because now in my mind, I'm like, what if it's that bad
Yeah.
and now I'm trapped? So I was able to change it. We got on the phone with United. They were really great. Although, like, my flight went from having like one layover to having like two layovers. And then I had to be up like at 3 in the morning. I was like, listen, this is better than like being stranded and at the airport or like my flight getting canceled last minute or whatever the case is. So I was able to switch everything at no cost. So we were able to get that changed through United because it was due to inclement weather. So some airlines, they're really great with being able to kind of accommodate that. So I would say definitely if you are a little bit nervous because of weather related issues, kind of getting ahead of it beforehand because you have a better chance of finding something. So because we were able to do that like early on like Saturday afternoon, I was able to get like one of the very like last flights that were going to leave out of like the New Jersey area into New Mexico. So getting ahead of it because now if you're in a situation where the weather ended up being that bad and so many flights were canceled and delayed because of it, even that Sunday when it started to snow, people weren't even able to get like a change of flight. So if you're able to get ahead of it ahead of time, it going to give you the ability to find like an alternate flight for yourself.
Yeah, and I really like what you said, Rosa, about like the United States, if you're traveling domestic, working with your airline, because United, I mostly fly with them, like going to Newark. They do on their apps send out alerts if there's like issues with weather, and they'll have like a waiver where you could like rebook your flight for free. So that's always really helpful. I know when Newark, they were doing like repaving on one of the runways, they were sending out messages about like, hey, like your flight may be massively delayed. If you want to change it, here are some options. In the summer, I see it a lot because of thunderstorms. Like when I was flying to Athens this summer, there were some massive thunderstorms coming through later. Now, luckily, my flight was at 5 p.m. So it was kind of before like when the thunderstorms were supposed to arrive. But United was sending out like notifications like, hey, there could be some problematic weather later. If you want to take an earlier flight or a later flight, you have the option to do so at no cost. And then, like, as far as like compensation, like in the US, it's like a lot more difficult to be compensated. But I will say, if you're nice to customer service, because keep in mind, I just want to put out, it's not the gate agent's fault. It's not customer service's fault.
Especially when it comes to the weather. Like, come on.
Yeah,
You cannot control that.
no, they can't control blizzards. They can't control missiles. Like that stuff is like just completely out of their control. So just be polite. I know the last time I was coming back from Florida after seeing my parents, I was delayed in Fort Myers airport for like 4 hours because of the runway repaving and because of winds, and it was just kind of like a hassle on Easter Sunday. So I had to contact customer service anyway because one of my award flights were missing from like the calculator for status. So she fixed that. And then I was like, hey, just so you know, I was delayed 4 hours. It was a bit of a hassle. Is there anything United can do for me, even if it's small? And she was like, yeah, sure. She's like, we can like give you 10,000 miles as like kind of, a thank you for being patient. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. So it does always pay to ask nicely, but just like don't blow up at customer service. Like they're not in control of things falling apart, especially weather. I mean, nobody wanted that blizzard to happen. That was out of everyone's control.
Exactly. So again, like you said, making sure that you're checking in any updates that the airlines they're releasing. I know that also happened to us when we were going to Costa Rica. We were traveling during the month of March. Same thing. It was like a last minute like snowstorm that was coming in. So United was like, listen, we can reroute you. However, we would need to do like a layover like in Chicago. Same thing. We had to like leave a little bit earlier, but at least we were gonna beat like the impending like snowstorm coming into like the New Jersey, New York area. So we ended up doing that. We kind of changed our flight. We had to leave a little bit earlier and we ended up having to do like a layover in like Chicago in order to get to Costa Rica. But we are like, well, let's just be safe than sorry. And then that way we can kind of avoid the bad weather. So just again, being like proactive, being flexible with your travel plans if you can be. I know when I travel to certain destinations, I have like some travel constraints because I do work a corporate job. So when I'm traveling somewhere, I do have like my limited PTO. So like getting stranded somewhere, it's always like my biggest fear because I
Me
don't have
too.
the option to like really work from home. I go
Mm-mm.
into the office every day, and granted, some of my work I can do it remotely. However, there's certain things that I cannot do if I'm outside of the US. So it really does stress me out if I do have to get stranded somewhere. And like I'm also kind of terrible because I normally don't build in like a day buffer.
Me neither.
So, but I'm also kind of like YOLO it. However, if I am traveling international, I try to be able to come in like late on Saturday. So I do have an extra day like on Sunday to kind of like unwind and like reset. And it also gives me a little bit of a buffer. So if something does happen to go wrong with the delayed, I'm not like stressed out. If I'm traveling domestic, then there I feel a little bit more comfortable, like just winging it and like coming in today, going to work the next day. I do that more often than not. So if you are that type of traveler that you get like a little bit anxious or like stressed out, then make sure that you are building that extra buffer in case something does go wrong with your travel plans.
Yeah, I like that about building in that extra buffer day because I know we get a lot of guests here who work remotely, but we know that that's not the reality for everyone. So if that is not you, having that buffer goes a long way. But unfortunately, we know that planes are not the only reason that trips can go wrong and fall apart. We talked about weather. So, have you ever had any massive weather mishaps while on the ground? Because I know with me, not all the time, but a lot of the time, the rain gods just like raining on my trip. I feel like I just bring the rain. So if your destination is in a drought, have me travel there. There will be rain. I guarantee it.
You bring the thunder.
Yes.
So I think for the most part, when I travel somewhere, that's like one of my criteria, right? So depending on when we're traveling. So for instance, when we travel as a family, normally we travel in the month of like January, where Sam has like winter break. We'll travel again like in March, and sometimes we'll do like a summer trip. So we kind of already know like when we're traveling throughout the year, and we kind of pick a destination kind of based on what's popular or like what we want to see during that time frame. So, for instance, I think this was last year, we hadn't been to London or to Paris. So, we figured this could be like a good destination because everything that we wanted to do was pretty much like indoors. So, we were fine that if it rains on us, like granted, we wanted to be like nice and sunny. So, we're like walking around, getting to explore the neighborhoods. But we were also fine that if we got hit with like a little bit of rain while we were traveling there, and during the month of January, the rainfall tends to be a little bit higher, especially like in both of those locations, London and Paris. But we were fine with that because we were doing a lot of more like indoor museums. And then we kind of planned any of the outdoor things that we wanted to do on the days that were like sunny. So that actually worked out fine for us, which we were okay. Now, granted, if we're going to a destination, so like in a couple of weeks, we're going to be going to St. Martin. We want to go there for the beautiful beaches. So we made sure that this was a destination that would be good for us to go during the month of March, that you're getting as much sun as possible with the least amount of rainfall. So we kind of try to prepare ourselves depending on what type of trip we want and kind of finding a destination that fits that. But again, you cannot control Mother Nature. I know when when I went to Portugal. Sam and I did a mother-daughter trip and meet up with my friend Michelle. And she said, I have not seen this much rain. Like, I think it was like a record for Portugal, the amount of rain they got during the month of January. And it was funny because every time we would walk into like a museum, the sun would come out. And I'm like, are you serious, Portugal? Like, is this a sign that you just don't like me? Because like we would be outside and it's like pouring rain. The second we're indoors somewhere, it would be sunny. So you can't control it. So I think knowing what kind of trip you want and kind of planning accordingly, but also knowing like, again, you cannot control the weather. So just being able to be flexible and pivot. So you're not going to go, like I know when we went to Japan, we really wanted to go to Okinawa, and this is during the month of July. Apparently, they're known for like really bad weather, which was crazy. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to go see the beaches.
Yeah, no.
So
Not a good idea.
understand, yeah, understand the destination, read, and you can kind of more or less know based on like the forecast and the trends. And they're pretty, I would say, like spot on for the most part.
Yeah, it's like know what kind of trip you want because if it's something that's going to be a very outdoorsy trip, try to go if there's a dry season. I know for me, I went to London in February and it like rained a decent amount, but mostly everything we wanted to do was inside like the shops. We had like some theater performances. The one day we had a food tour and that was the day that it happened to be sunny, so it was like perfect that way. So if you're in a city, there's plenty of indoor activities to do like you said. When I was in Japan, actually it was June, so it was during the rainy season, but it wasn't ever like an insane amount of rain. At one time it would be kind of like on and off rain, and I knew that going in that it would be rainy season, so I just packed accordingly. I brought my waterproof shoes, I bought clothes that dried very quickly. In Japan, it's easy to buy umbrellas everywhere, and I knew too that the temples would be really beautiful in the rain, like super green and lush and just like lovely. So having like the preparation and going in ahead of time was good. But yeah, if it's like a beach vacation, like I know the Caribbean has like different seasons, you want to be mindful. So let's like move away from like weather. We've been talking about that a lot because it is like such a big part of planning travel. How about traveling with friends and family? Have you ever had a friend cancel or back out of a trip last minute? And how did that affect the trip?
So I've been very fortunate whenever we travel as a family. Obviously, we make it out the door together. Sometimes kicking and screaming. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, we almost had the one situation where Sam's passport wasn't going to arrive in time, but we kind of had a backup plan for that. So I've been very fortunate. I think the only time where I ran into the situation, I had planned a trip to go to Florida and I was going to go with one of my friends. And unfortunately, she had a personal emergency last minute. So she was unable to make it to the trip. So I almost canceled it. But fortunately for me, in that particular trip, I was working with various different hotels. So I didn't have to worry about coming out of pocket for any of my accommodations. I was also partnering with like a car rental company. So pretty much all of my expenses were covered. So I decided like, listen, why not? Like, only thing I have to factor in is like the cost of my food. Now, granted, I was going to be like in Florida by myself and I had never really done like a big solo trip by myself, but I was like, you know what? Maybe this is a sign. And I was actually feeling like a little bit like under the weather. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to feel crappy here in Jersey. Why not feel crappy on the beach anyways? So I ended up just still going on the trip. I know we talked about this during our episode with Jen when she talked about the one time she was going to go to Germany and like her friend bailed last minute, but she was still able to make it on the trip. So, again, depending on your personal situation, sometimes if you are depending on this friend due to financial constraints, you're going to be splitting the cost, that it might not be realistic for you to make it on the trip. But if you can still wing it, I say, you know what? Forget it. Leave your friend behind and just do it anyways.
Yeah, definitely. Because you make a good point about like coming out of pocket. Like I've had sometimes where friends like can't make it, but like I've always had enough time to be like, okay, like maybe I'll see, especially in Europe, they do this hotels that are just like single rooms. I'm like, what can I do to get the cost down? Because really, I'm the sort of person who will travel solo anyway. So I'm not too bothered by that type of stuff. But again, if it's something where there's like financial constraints involved, maybe like look into a more affordable destination, maybe see if you could go at a later date. But I can definitely see where that would be frustrating. I'm lucky I've never been in a situation where we have a luxury like hotel booked and the only way I could go is with them and they canceled. Like if if it was for something silly, I think I would be kind of annoyed. I'm a
Yeah.
bad person.
No, you're not. I mean, in my situation, unfortunately, my friend, her dog was like really sick and they were dealing with like some medical issues.
Mhm.
So she just didn't feel comfortable. Her dog had just surgery, like last minute emergency surgery. So she didn't feel comfortable just leaving her dog behind. So that's completely like
Yeah.
understandable. So in
Mhm.
a situation like that, I wouldn't be upset. I've had
Mhm.
situations where we're planning like a group trip and then a friend like last minute backs out and kind of like flakes out. So if you're that friend, we talk about this during like I think like our high maintenance episode or like the group trips, like know ahead of time. Again, things happen, but if you're not sure you can make it to this trip, don't drag it out and don't lead your friends on. Just be upfront and honest from the get-go. That way they can plan their trip accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a little different than like flaking on a brunch last minute. I think we've all had those moments where we have plans with friends on a weekend and maybe we have a really stressful week and you just like maybe just really, really don't feel like going out that day. So you kind of flake and bail. And maybe like the reason isn't the best, but you need like your time for you. Like, yeah, I could see where that would be frustrating for the person, but at least that would be like, sure, just like maybe you're going out to the mall or something like that. A trip is a much bigger expense with a lot more planning. So if you're the type of person who tends to bail on things last minute, maybe just like live your truth and exit the group chat.
Yes, just leave now before you like string us along for heartbreak. But I know we talked about a little bit, the importance of having like travel insurance because that can cover certain scenarios. So that way you're not coming out of pocket for a lot of things, or maybe you're getting like reimbursed like after the fact. So making sure that you're doing that beforehand, it gives you a little bit more like peace of mind. Making sure you have like your travel documents, everything's in order, know where you're staying, how long you're going to be at a destination. Because sometimes when you go through like immigration, they'll ask you like, how long are you here for? When do you fly back? So making sure like you have all that information handy, especially like on a long trip. Like sometimes I'm like still like half asleep when I'm strolling through immigration and I'm like, I don't know, how long am I here for? So I always like to make sure like I kind of like scroll through my notes real quick and have like all of that information just like at the top of my head. So when I'm going through immigration officers, like I can just answer any questions easily and actually know like what I'm talking about, right? But aside from that, I don't know about you, Rachel, but I am that traveler. I get travel anxiety. Like I know you're very open about your fear of flying. For me, it's like the process of like getting to the airport, going through security, making sure like my luggage is not like overweight, finding the right gate that I don't end up in the wrong area of the
Wrong
airport.
terminal.
Like, all of that, like, stresses me out. I am literally that traveler, like, we'll get to the airport, I have to see my gate. Once I see the
Yes.
gate and I'm like, "Okay, this is my flight, this is, like, where I'm going, now we can go to the lounge, or now we can grab food, now I can go to the bathroom and, like, pee." Like, I have to see the gate. I also check my passport, like, 10 times if
My
it is, like,
God,
an
my
international.
passport. I am always looking. And like, I know that there's a lot of funny like reels and TikToks about this of like people constantly going in their bags to check their passport. And then I know there's also one where it's like, oh, I'm making sure my gate exists before I get coffee. Like, it is really a real thing, just that reassurance to make sure everything is okay. Because, yeah, like, again, there's a lot of unknowns. Like, you don't know if that day security is going to be like a pain to get through. Maybe they're
Yeah.
short staffed. Like, you just don't know these things. And so the things you do have control over, like bringing your passport, like, it makes sense that you would check it a bunch of times.
Yeah, so exactly. I feel like that's like the biggest thing, like I said at the beginning of the episode. With travel, a lot of things are outside of your control. So, at least for me, the things I can control, I'll try to control it. So, I always try to build myself more than ample time to get to the airport, to get through security, even though I have like TSA pre check and I have like clear. I always still like to like make sure that I get there with ample time. And I'd rather just sit like at the lounge or in the gate than to be like stressed out because I've been in that situation where I've legit gotten to the airport, gone through security, and gotten on the plane. Like,
I
it's
hate that.
very stressful,
I've had to
and
run through the airport once and I will never do it again.
that is just not my travel style. I know some people, they just love it because they wanna spend the least amount of time in an airport as possible. But if you know that you get, like, anxious very easily or, like, little things like that can, like, easily stress you out, then give yourself that extra buffer. also too, like whenever we have to travel from Jersey to like, let's say we're flying out of JFK or LaGuardia, it usually takes us like 45 minutes, but I always make sure to give myself like an hour and a half to commute there because there have been times where we're like at a complete like deadlock in traffic and now we're like rushing through security. So I like to build myself, even though I know normally it'll take me 45 minutes, I give myself like double the amount of time to commute there. So just like the things you can control, try to control them. But would you say there's other tips that you would give our listeners on how they can prepare for those unexpected travel problems?
So, I have a couple suggestions. So, if you're traveling internationally, if you are a US citizen, I always advocate for enrolling in the STEP program where you send your travel details to a US embassy or consulate. And if there's something you need to know about, like in your destination, they will email you or text you. It's just like an extra layer of security. Your tax dollars pay for it. So you might as well use it, get a return on your investment that you're forced to pay to the federal government every single year and enroll in STEP. I've done that for my trip to Estonia. I did it for my trip to Japan. I did it for my trip to London, and it's always worth it for the extra peace of mind. And then making sure you have travel insurance. Like, I can't speak enough about travel insurance. I know I've said this on other episodes, but a lot of the travel credit cards, like the Chase Sapphire Preferred, has travel insurance on it, but it's more for things like flight delays, flight cancellations, rental car insurance, whereas that medical component may be missing from some plans. So always make sure that you have medical insurance because your US insurance does not follow you overseas. If you are a senior citizen traveling, Medicare does not follow you overseas. So just make sure that you always have supplemental medical insurance before you go anywhere because I know sometimes we like to admire universal health care in other countries, but that is not for travelers passing through. You will have to pay out of pocket and it can be quite expensive. So just make sure that you have that extra travel insurance if something were to go wrong. And then, like, just be flexible. Like, I have a story. This was like years ago. I had a solo trip booked to Spain. I was going to go to Madrid and Barcelona. And the day before my trip, there was a terrorist attack at the Brussels airport. And even though obviously Spain and Belgium are very different, it really freaked me out. Like the thought of doing an international trip just like was really unsettling to me. I just could not bring myself to do it. So last minute, I changed my flights to go out to San Francisco, and I had an amazing time. I stayed in a really fun hostel, and then my uncle and cousins were out in Napa at the same time, so I added on time to spend with them, to go to the wineries and all. So I still like had a trip, but it's like I can't say enough about being flexible. And I know that we talk a lot about like being fearless on this podcast, but at the same time, if your like instincts are kicking in and there's something you really don't want to do, you want to change your trip. I know the world's chaotic right now. Just like do it for your peace of mind. Like sometimes it's not always worth it.
Exactly. And I know too, like it's great to like enroll like in these different programs that are offered by the government, but also too, I would say like if you're like on Facebook or Threads or like Reddit, also like being part of like groups. I know when I traveled one time to Puerto Rico, this was one of the instances where like I was stuck in massive traffic. And by the time I got through security, I had to go board the plane because like they were doing like last call. And I happened to leave my driver's license in the TSA bin. So I didn't realize it until like the second day of our trip. And I was like freaking out. It was over like a long holiday. Michael went to like Staples, like FedEx, trying to send it to me. He's like, listen, it's not going to get there till like Tuesday or Wednesday. And I was flying back that Monday. So I was so stressed out. But I remember, I think this was like Girls Love Travel. I was like on their Facebook group and I like commented on there and like everyone gave me like some amazing like feedback and like reassurance. And they're like, listen, call the airline. Usually you can go through TSA, just get there like early. They'll just do like extra steps to like verify your like identity. Like you're going to be fine. They just gave me a little bit more reassurance versus like when I went into like the US.gov and they were like, without an ID, you're not flying anywhere. So sometimes like these resources, they're going to give you specific information and like what to do in case of an emergency, but there's nothing more than sometimes getting that reassurance from like a real person who has gone through the scenario. Like Rachel said, right now we're living in a state where the world is a little crazy. And I've seen like a lot of stuff going on social of people like being stranded, like in the Middle East, or they're traveling within certain areas and they just can't get back home. So again, being proactive and just like reaching out to people, you know, sometimes you get some actionable advice from whether it's local or someone who has been in this situation. So also if you have like different type of like group trips or I'm sorry, like different groups within Facebook that you can join. I think that's also like a little bit more reassurance because sometimes we feel like we're alone and someone can even just give you that little, peace of mind that you need.
I'm sure like any like scenario you have in your head, it happened to somebody and they're going to talk about it online, especially if it's a really dramatic story. I know
Yeah.
like social media, we also like there's a lot of positivity and like influencer spaces if you look on Instagram and whatnot, but you dip into Reddit or those Facebook groups, people want to share like the chaos. So you'll find
Oh yeah.
someone who's like able to help you. So do you want to do a rapid fire round for like your trip falling apart?
Let's do it.
All right. So, Rosa, would you rather have your flight delayed for 12 hours at the airport or have your luggage lost for the entire trip?
I'll take the flight delayed.
I
I'll
will
just
too.
go like lounge shopping. I think I said this in another episode. Like I'm petite. Like for me to find clothes, sometimes it's difficult. This is why like I do like carry on only and like I rarely check a bag because I'm always afraid that like my clothes are gonna get lost and then I'm gonna be wearing like the same outfit my whole entire trip. So just
Yeah.
leave me in the airport for 12 hours.
Yeah, if my luggage is lost the entire trip, that is like so much of a pain in the butt. That's why I like bringing like my bag, like not checking it going to the destination. But if I buy lots of souvenirs and have to check it going home, that's fine. I'm like, yeah, ship it if you need to. But I'm the same way. I'll just go like hang out in the lounge.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So, would you rather travel with a friend who complains about everything or a friend who never helps plan anything?
I'd
God, those are both horrible.
I honestly the one that never helps plan anything because like I have all my stuff that I want to do, and if they're just going to follow me all over the place like a little lost puppy, that's fine because I get to see everything I want and I could be selfish. If I have a friend who complains about everything, I'm leaving them behind because I can't handle that. I will jump off the train at a different destination and let them fend for themselves. Like I do
Like,
not deal with
goodbye.
complaining adults. No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. How about
Uh,
you?
I feel like I'm going to cop out because I've been in both situations, so I'm not going to answer the question. They both suck. Like, I'd rather just
Yeah.
go by myself because, like, I feel like somebody who's constantly, like, complaining, like, for me, traveling is meant to decompress and be fun. Like, I don't want to deal with a complainer. Like, for that, just stay home. Also, too, like, you don't want to deal with someone that they're leaving all the planning up to you, and then they're going to complain if you don't do X, Y, and Z. So,
Oh,
like,
no. Like, if someone complains about an itinerary and they did no planning, I don't
yeah,
wanna hear it. I'll be like,
like,
"Stay
just
home.
stay home.
Do
Stay
less.
home.
Do
I'll go
less."
by myself.
Alright, how about this one? Would you rather go on a trip where it rains every single day or a trip where all your planned activities get canceled?
Oof, that's
I don't
tough.
know. I mean,
I'm
if
gonna
it's
have to go with the
London
rain.
yeah, I was gonna say if it's London or Paris or New York, it can rain every day. There's stuff inside, but yeah, if all my activities got
Yeah.
ooh.
Yeah, because I feel like if I'm traveling somewhere and I've planned specific things to do or activities and they get canceled, and I've been there, so I talked about that in one of the other episodes during our trip to Iceland, how I cried because we missed our tour. And it was devastating. And then we pivoted and then we ended up renting a car. We did like our own like DIY road trip, which ended up being like the highlight of our trip. So like from something that went wrong, it turned out to be like one of the best days of our trip. So things can definitely take a turn. But if I'm traveling somewhere and I have specific activities planned, I might be a little devastated and I will pivot and find other things to do. But I think I'd rather just deal with the rain.
I know. It's
Unless it's like downpour, then it's
unless it's
like
downpouring and
I don't want
flooding
to
and I
mess up
can't
my
go anywhere.
shoes.
Yeah. I don't wanna be in a situation where it's, like, downpouring and there's floods and, like, the public transit's closed and all of that kinda nonsense. If
Yeah,
it's just, like, drizzling, I could care less.
exactly.
Like,
That happened to us in Paris. Like the one day we were gonna go see the Moulin Rouge. I wanted to wear like this cute outfit. I had just purchased like my nice like Gucci loafers. So I wanted to look fancy. And it was like a complete downpour. And I was like, yeah, no, we're gonna have to rethink this outfit. All of my pictures that I wanted to do just went out the window. And so maybe I don't know. Now I'm
yeah.
just confused.
Yeah, it's rough. So, Rosa, before we wrap it up, do you have any last minute tips for anyone who's listening to this episode? Maybe has some trips in 2026, but they're a little nervous about how chaotic the world is right now with traveling.
Say just do it and just be like mentally prepared to know that something may go wrong in your trip and hopefully it's nothing devastating. I always say like as long as nothing physically happens to you, Then if it's gonna cost you a little bit extra money, like let's say you do lose your luggage, and you might have to go shopping. Okay, you're
It's
shopping in
stuff.
Paris. Things could be worse. So as long as nothing physically happening to you, you can always just kind of like pivot out of the situations, roll with the punches, but don't let the fear of something bad happening restrain you from going somewhere. And like Rachel said, like, at the end of the day, safety is key. So if something is going on in a specific destination and you have to maybe travel to a new place or postpone your trip, that's okay too. Like, there's no wrong way to travel, but just know that things will go wrong. Things go wrong at home. So, like, why would you think things won't go wrong when you're traveling somewhere? But the more you prepare, the more you get out there and do it, you can then be like us and just like laugh it off. Like now, in the moment when I like booked like 2 hotels when we went to Peru, I was like mortified. And I didn't tell Michael and Samantha until like we got home because I was like, yeah, like Michael's gonna be like, what the heck, Rosa? Like you just like wasted X amount of money. So now I can laugh about it now, but in the moment, like I legit wanted to cry.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so true. At least, like, pivot, be flexible. And like Rosa said, as long as nothing like physically happens to you, you'll bounce back from it. Like, I've lost like my phone. I've had like flights canceled. I've had all sorts of things happen, but I still have like great stories. I'm still here. And it does work out most of the time. So try not to stress too much. I know in the moment it could be scary or upsetting, but just like try to think clearly and problem solve. And I promise you'll get out of it. So that's all for today's episode of Bon Voyage Besties with your hosts, Rosa and Rachel. So today we had a chance to talk about the less glamorous side of travel when the trip falls apart. So as much as social media shows us dreamy beaches and beautiful airport selfies, we know the reality, especially in that airport, can be a little bit different because travel is unpredictable. So you can have delayed flights, bad weather, lost luggage, even friends who bail the last minute, in which case, if it's for a flaky reason, get out of the group chat, please. But as frustrating as these moments can be, they often turn the stories that we can laugh about and memories we never forget. So travel doesn't always go according to plan, but sometimes the chaos is just part of the adventure. So thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow us on Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review. It really does help the podcast. And if you want to share some of your trips that have fallen apart with us, you have some good stories, feel free to DM us. We would love to hear them.
Yes. So until next time, Bon Voyage Besties, make sure to check your passport and get travel insurance.
Yep, get that travel insurance. Bon voyage, besties. Enjoy your travels.
Adios.
Bye.